This QDS video will start an ACASI survey, demonstrate how to interrupt and resume an interview, and then see how the interrupted and resumed data is represented in the Warehouse Manager. You may occasionally need to interrupt an interview if the respondent is unable to complete the full survey in one sitting. In some cases, you may also need to resume and then complete that interview at a later time. First, we will open an ACASI survey by double-clicking on the survey file name from Windows Explorer. Note that you could also have a desktop shortcut to start from. For this example, we'll open our ACASI survey study. Note that the ACASI interview control files will always have an extension of .qsi. ACASI will open to the first screen of the survey, which here is an information element screen. Click Next Question to proceed. We'll respond to the first couple of questions before we interrupt our survey, first by entering a subject identifier, and next by proceeding through a welcome screen, information elements, and next we'll enter a response for the gender question. At this point, we'll decide to interrupt the interview. In ACASI, you can safely interrupt an interview in the following ways. If keyboard use was enabled under ACASI build options in the Design Studio, then you can use the keyboard shortcut Alt F4 to interrupt. If keyboard use was not enabled under ACASI build options, then you can use a mouse key combination to interrupt. Click both the right and left mouse buttons simultaneously in the upper left-hand corner to interrupt. Note it's very important to only use those methods. You should never use the Task Manager, Control-Alt-Delete, or just shut down the computer, as that could leave the data file in a corrupted state. For both of those interrupt options, such as Alt F4, you'll be asked, "Are you sure you want to terminate this interview?" If you say no, you'll return to the ACASI screen. If you say yes, then you will interrupt the current interview. It will be saved in an interrupted state from which it can be resumed later. To resume an interrupted interview, go to Start, All Program, Questionnaire Development System, ACASI Program. You will see the ACASI Open dialog box. Navigate to the appropriate folder and select your control file. Here, our Study ACASI file. Select the Resume a Prior Interview radio button at the bottom and select Open. The Pending Interviews dialog box will display a list of any incomplete cases in the current data file. In other words, for ACASI to find your incomplete interview, the data file still needs to be present in the same folder and with the same name as the ACASI control file. If the QAD data file containing the interrupted interview was moved or renamed, it will not be displayed. If you do need to open an incomplete interview from a renamed data file, you can change the files of type to QAD data files, and then navigate to the renamed file. Note that you will also be asked to select the control file name. Overall, it is simplest if interviews are completed before the QAD data file is renamed or moved. The Pending Interview box initially shows only incomplete interviews. If you do need to open a previously completed interview, you can select the Show All button. In this case, we have two other interviews that are complete. However, the Show All button will only be enabled if the Disallow Resumption of Completed Interviews was unchecked under ACASI build options. Next, we'll select our interview to resume. Here, that is the incomplete interview 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll click OK. A dialog box will confirm that the interview will be opened. The ACASI program will take you to the screen at the point at which the interview is interrupted. Here, that's the response for the gender item. From this point, we can go ahead and complete our short survey. Next, we'll take a look at how the incomplete and resumed interview look in the data file in the Warehouse Manager. With your local warehouse open, go to File, Open Source Data, and navigate to your QAD interview file and select Open. When your source data file opens, you will notice that you have two interviews listed for your interrupted and your resumed interview. One is marked as Resumed Later, and one is marked as Duplicate Complete. The resumed later is the interrupted interview where we stopped at the gender question. If you double-click on the incomplete record, you'll notice that all the variables following the gender question are blank. If you select the duplicate complete interview and look at the variables, you'll see that they're completed all the way to the end. You can copy these interviews into your local warehouse. First, we'll copy all of our completed interviews into our local warehouse. Then, if you would like, you can also select and copy in your duplicate interview. QDS will ask you if you want to replace the interview since it is a duplicate. We will respond no so that we can have both the incomplete and completed interviews in our local warehouse for documentation. To mark the incomplete interview deleted before exporting your data, as deleted interviews will not be exported, select the Resumed Later and click on Delete. By default, for the data correction log, you will be asked for your name or initials. You can first enter that, and then you'll also be asked to update the reason for the delete or undelete. Here we will enter incomplete duplicate for our reason and select OK. Now you can see that your full interview is marked as complete and the other is marked as deleted, resumed later. Alternately, if the interview had never been completed, it would be marked like this in the Warehouse Manager data file and then Local Warehouse. Again, any data that was never collected will be blank or empty. You can decide whether or not those cases should be kept for data analysis. To learn more about QDS data files and data management with the Warehouse Manager, see QDS Online Help or other QDS tutorial videos.